Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Jai Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Jamunatira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mr. Pad Paramahansa Purajikacharya Ashtotar to Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Purajikacharya Ashtotar to Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Okay. So, text 3. Right? For sure. Just take a look at it. 3. He knows, he remembers. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, now we're in the reverse position. This morning it was too low because of the previous night. Now it's too high because of the morning. So just bring it down to the Vijay taking rest platform. Okay. On the 17th day of February 2021 in SanDiego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we've begun a new chapter, Attaining the Supreme, chapter 8, and we are in text 3. Most of your copies, 347, page 347. Shri Bhagavana Vacha Aksharam Brahma Paramam Swabhavo Dhyatmamuchyate Bhuta Bhavo Karo Visarga Karma Sangitaha. Shri Bhagavano Vacha Aksharam Brahma Paramam Swabhavo Dhyatmamuchyate Bhuta Bhavo Bhavakaro Visarga Karma Sangitaha. Shri Bhagavano Vacha Aksharam Brahma Paramam Swabhavo Dhyatmamuchyate Bhuta Bhavo Bhavakaro Visarga karma sangitaha. Shri Bhagavana Vacha Aksharam Brahma Paramam Svabhavo Dhyatmamuchyate Pulta Bhavo Bhavakaro Visarga Karma Sangitaha. Glenn. Shri Bhagavana Vacha Aksharam Brahma Paramam Svabhavo Dhyatmam Uchyate Bhuta Bhavo Bhavakaro Visarga Karma Sangitaha. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Aksharam Brahma Paramam Svabhavo Dhyatmamuchyate Bhuta Bhavo Bhavakaro Saga Karma Sangitaha. Word by words. Shri Bhagavana Vacha, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, said, Aksharam, indestructible, Brahma, Brahman, Paramam, transcendental, Svabhavaha, eternal nature, Adhyatmam, the self, Uchyate is called, Bhuta Bhava Udbhava Karaha, producing the material bodies of the living entities, Visargaha, creation, Karma, fruit of activities, Sangitaha is called. Translation. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, the indestructible, transcendental living entity is called Brahman, and his eternal nature is called Adhyatma, the self. Action pertaining to the development of the material bodies of the living entities is called karma, or fruit of activities. Purport. Brahman is indestructible and eternally existing, and its constitution is not changed at any time. But beyond Brahman, there is Parabrahman. Brahman refers to the living entity, and Parabrahman refers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The constitutional position of the living entity is different from the position he takes in the material world. In material consciousness, his nature is to try to be the Lord of matter. But in spiritual consciousness, Krishna consciousness, his position is to serve the Supreme. When the living entity is in material consciousness, he has to take on various bodies in the material world. That is called karma, or varied creation by the force of material consciousness. In Vedic literature, the living entity is called Jivatma and Brahman, but he is never called Parabrahman. The living entity, or Jivatma, takes different positions. Sometimes he merges into the dark material nature and identifies himself with matter, and sometimes he identifies himself with the superior spiritual nature. Therefore, he is called the Supreme Lord's marginal energy. According to his identification with material or spiritual nature, he receives a material or spiritual body. In material nature, he may take a body from any of the 8,400,000 species of life. But in spiritual nature, he has only one body. In material nature, he is manifested sometimes as a man, demigod, animal, beast, bird, etc., according to his karma. To attain material heavenly planets and enjoy their facilities, he sometimes performs sacrifices, yajna. But when his merit is exhausted, he returns to earth again in the form of a man. This process is called karma. The Chandogya Upanishad describes the Vedic sacrificial process. On the sacrificial altar, 5 kinds of offerings are made into 5 kinds of fire. The 5 kinds of fire are conceived of as the heavenly planets, the clouds, the earth, man and woman. And the 5 kinds of sacrificial offerings are faith, the enjoyer on the moon, rain, grains, and semen. In the process of sacrifice, the living entity makes specific sacrifices to attain specific heavenly planets and consequently reaches them. When the merit of sacrifice is exhausted, the living entity descends to earth in the form of rain, then takes on the form of grains, and the grains are eaten by man and transformed into semen, which impregnates a woman, and thus the living entity once again attains the human form to perform sacrifice and so repeat the same cycle. In this way, the living entity perpetually comes and goes on the material path. The Krishna-conscious person, however, avoids such sacrifices. He takes directly to Krishna consciousness and thereby prepares himself to return to Godhead. Impersonalist commentators on the Bhagavad Gita unreasonably assume that Brahman takes the form of Jiva in the material world. And to substantiate this, they refer to chapter 15, verse 7 of the Gita. But in this verse, the Lord also speaks of the living entity as an eternal fragment of myself. The fragment of God, the living entity, may fall down into the material world, but the Supreme Lord Achyuta never falls down. Achyuta is a name for Krishna. It means he who never falls down. Therefore, this assumption that the Supreme Brahman assumes the form of Jiva is not acceptable. It is important to remember that in Vedic literature, Brahman, the living entity, is distinguished from Parabrahman, the Supreme Lord. Om Jnana Timurandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So in the teachings of Lord Chaitanya to Sanatana Goswami, those are the most exhaustive teachings in the Chaitanya Charitamrita of Lord Chaitanya. He also has teachings to Rupa Goswami. He has conversations with Prakashananda Saraswati and all the sannyasis in Banaras, and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. There's various conversations. He has Ramananda Roy. But the most exhaustive are those with Sanatana Goswami. And those teachings have been outlined, given a nice outline in our 10 points. Dasa Mula. Dasha means 10. Don't confuse it with the word das. Doesn't mean anything. Dasha means 10. Roots of the philosophy that Lord Chaitanya gave us, that he taught, the Krishna consciousness. All based on the Vedas, of course. So, this part of the Bhagavad Gita, in which Krishna is answering systematically the questions of Arjuna, and Arjuna's questions are inspired by the end of the previous chapter, where Krishna described what one will know if one becomes freed from the delusions of duality. In other words, he transcends the bonds of material nature. What will he know? Brahma, completely. Adhyatmam, karma. Does it sound familiar? These are the subjects that are being asked. Adibhuta, Adidaiva, Adiyagya, and how prayanakale pitamam. How can one know you at the time of death? So those subject matters are being dealt with systematically here. Arjuna then asks the question, what is that Brahma, what is that Atma, etc. And now in text 3, Krishna begins his answers. So, now why did I bring up that Dashamula? Because this is all part of what we call Sambandha Gyan. Sambandha Gyan, in those 10 points, the first 8 points have to do with Sambandha. In other words, that's essential knowledge for us to be founded on our practice of Krishna consciousness with faith. Because this is all very mysterious. In other words, we can't figure any of this out by our senses and by our mind. This is all received knowledge. And Krishna is now going to give a nice little summary of these, what each one is, and describe the most important point, which is how one can know him and how can transcend the bonds of birth and death. So he starts, Aksharam Brahma Paramam. Now Aksharam means that which cannot be cut up. Chara means to divide and cut up. So Aksharam means that which is indestructible. Indestructible. So the first thing is the indestructible living entity, the Atma, Adhyatma, is known as, is called Brahman. So that's the famous Aham Brahmasmi. Now why are we Brahman and Krishna is also called Brahman? Because we're part and parcel. Mamai Vangsha Jiva Loka. Krishna refers to that verse in the 15th chapter. That Krishna said, all these living entities here, countless, unlimited, they're all Angsha of me. Angsha is a little particle that has the same quality, but not the same quantity. Example of the drop of water in the ocean, the sun ray to the sun. So, we are also Akshara as living entities. We cannot be cut. Remember chapter 2. Cannot be cut, cannot be burned, cannot be drowned like that. We can't be destroyed. which is very encouraging. That means we're eternal. But the problem is that because we identify with this ever-changing and very destructible material energy, certainly the forms are destructive, we think that we're changing, we think that we're dying, we think that we're being destroyed. And we operate on that level, and we completely forget that we're pure spirit. So Krishna is disabusing us of that. So now, then what is karma? Karma is that activity which produces another body. Now why does it produce another body? Because this is Prabhupada's famous fruit of action, fruit of activity. We're acting in such a way to gain some benefit, we hope, either on the gross or on the subtle level, you see. But our actions are motivated by a material desire, not by any kind of spiritual desire. So that activity, that fruit activity, creates a vritti, creates a change in our consciousness, planting a desire seed. And also, that activity, either sinful or pious, is being recorded in the etheric record, if you want to call it that. In other words, Krishna knows, Paramatma knows, and at the time of death, it's all totaled up. The good karma, we helped others. The bad karma, we hurt others. All those material desires, all of it's figured up into a very complicated mix, and we're rewarded just a nice another body to fulfill those karmas. In other words, in which those karmas can be worked out. And it's been going on like that for a long, long time. So that I always found that very fascinating. That activity that is getting you another body, and that's any activity that's called that fruitive in any way, and that's basically all material activity. We're surrounded by it. We don't even, because we don't know the difference between spiritual activity and material activity. So visarga, the creation of another body. So one of the main points here is how, and that if you recall chapter 3, because chapter 3 was all about karma yoga, and it was full of talk of sacrifice. Remember that? He was talking about sacrifice here. Because sacrifice means you're not doing it, at least on one level, for yourself. You're sacrificing something for a higher purpose. Now, that higher purpose may be so you can go to the heavenly planets. So ultimately it is fruitive. But real sacrifice is simply for the pleasure of Krishna, for yajna. Yajna is another name for Vishnu. So there's that famous yagyartat kamano nyatra lokoyam karma bandhana. Action must be done or performed as a sacrifice for Vishnu. Otherwise, whatever we do binds us to this material world. That's that's one of these stark statements that should really go in deep. Yeah. That's the third chapter, text 9. Yeah, yagyartat kamano yatra. So that it ties right in here because he's discussing Adi Yajna. Who is the Adi Yajna? Now this Adi what is it? Adhyatmam, Adi Yajna, and Adi Bhauta or Adi Bhutam. What is this Adi? So Adi is like a principle. In other words, who is the Lord of sacrifice? What is the ultimate meaning to Adi Bhuta and Adhyatmam? And that ties in with what you may remember as the Adi Bhautika, Adi Atmika, and Adi Daivika miseries. You remember those famous threefold miseries? Pertaining to the mind and body, our own mind and body, Adi Atma. Because Atma can refer to anything of the self. Primarily the soul, but also the mind, the intelligence, the body, the senses. That's all Atma. Even the super soul is also, the Paramatma is also Atma. So everything depends on the context of what the word means. So when you talk about Atmika miseries, miseries that are caused by our own body and our own mind, and there's the big list, there's no apparent reason. I mean, as you get older, where did that pain come from? Now I thought, I was feeling pretty good. Now suddenly my knee is practically out, It's just like that. Things, And what to speak of mental problems? Those could be just as scarring, some kind of, like when I was a kid, really young, maybe 5 years old, I was very rambunctious, and I was recuperating from some illness, some common kid's illness, measles, mumps, something like that, And I wouldn't stay in bed. I was jumping around the room doing all kinds of things, like that. My mother I wouldn't do it. So I got some more serious disease, and they had to take me to the hospital. My father took me to the hospital. And I was admitted. And I didn't even know what it was at the time, but apparently there was some kind of a disease in the spinal column. And if it got to the brain, I would be ruined, finished. I forget what they call it. So, I'm like, what is it? It wasn't meningitis, it's something else. But it was real serious. And I was contagious, so my parents couldn't come to visit me. I'm just this young little kid, So it seemed like a month. It may have been, I may have been in there a week, because my time sense is different as you're a kid. And so I'm lying in bed all day, with a young kid. And in the evening, they would come I was on the ground floor, so they would come to the window, and I could see them. My older brother, who was 5 years older than me, and my parents would come, and it would be like the highlight of the day, So that experience had an effect on me, my whole life, In other words, I was affected emotionally by that. And but I survived it. My father was terrified. He thought that that there was some brain damage, and so they did the electroencephalogram to make sure that was. And he was so relieved when he found out it was normal. I'm sorry, I forgot to turn that off. So, and then I just grew up, and I never was conscious, but it had an effect. Anything that happens when you're very young like that, really. Luckily, it wasn't, totally debilitating. But that's an adhyatmic misery. If you're abused when you're a kid, and you can last a whole lifetime, it's like brain damage or something, So this is the world we live in, and Krishna is describing it here, different aspects of it. And Prabhupada makes a big point in this purport of always distinguishing between the Atma and the Paramatma, the Brahman and the Parabrahman. This is what it's called conflation. There's a principle in English called conflation, where you conflate two things that shouldn't be conflated. You combine them. You say there's no basic difference. But there's a key difference between the Atma and the Paramatma. And we're infinitesimal, Krishna is infinite. We're one in quality, but we're completely different in quantity. And so the problem with the Atma is trying to be the Paramatma. We try to be the master and the controller and the enjoyer of this world. And this is the beginning of all our trouble. The false ego, constituted basically of me and mine. I am this body, and things relation to this body are mine. And I'm going to try to increase those things and enjoy. So Prabhupada refers, what was I going to refer to? Different kinds of sacrifice mentioned here. You can study those. And so here he's referring to a classic part of the Mayavad philosophy, that a little piece of the Parabrahman breaks off and becomes the jiva. You see? And through knowledge alone, this is why they're so into studying Vedanta, Once we understand that we're non-different, than the Brahman, we can again merge back in and take our rightful place as the supreme, But it's totally fallacious, because as Prabhupada quotes here, he doesn't quote the Sanskrit, Mamai Vangsho Jiva Loka Jiva Bhuta Sanatanaha. And that Sanatana makes all the difference. Krishna is saying, these living entities here are my Angsha eternally. This is our eternal position. We are energy, we're not the energetic. Prabhupada refers to, what was that verse I was thinking of? Now it's leaving me. I'll come again. But the living entity, Lord Chaitanya's famous statement. What is the constitutional position of the living entity? He says, Jivera Swaruphoy Krishnera Nitya Das. This is at the beginning of the instruction to Sanatana Goswami, chapter 20, I believe, of the Madhya Lila. And the next line is also important. Krishnera Tatasta Shakti Beda Beda Prakash. This Beda Beda is a very important concept, simultaneously one and different. So the eternal identity of Surup. Now you remember that Mukti, as defined by Bhagavatam, means mukti hit vanyata rupam swarupena vivastati, to give up all of these other forms that we've had, give up identification with them, and to be situated in our swarup. That means to act on the basis of our original spiritual body, as Prabhupada says, that we have the spiritual body that's not destructible and it's unchangeable, whereas our material bodies are constantly changing, even in this one lifetime. And ultimately, we have to discard them. So that Swarup, Krishna as Lord Chaitanya, he declares that's the real identity, as an eternal servant of Krishna. Now, what exactly constitutes that service? We're all individuals. And that's why we have these 5 rasas, and even in each rasa there's variations. You read the Nectar of Devotion, so many different kinds of friends that Krishna has. The special intimate friends, those who are more like servants, those who are a little elder, like try to protect him. Balaram takes that role, And the very intimate friends who also help him to meet the gopis and all these different things. There's an infinite variety, but it's all that basic friendship rasa. Likewise with the other rasas. So there's all this variety, but there's a oneness because it's all focused on expressing love for Krishna. And Krishna relates to every entity individually. That's because he's infinite. Their relationship is perfectly suited. Even the cows, they all have their names. I was reading this beautiful prayer the other day, the songs of the gopis, in the 10th canto. There's one called the Yugal Gita, where they're like pairs of verses, and I think there may be pairs of gopis too, but anyway. So, one is, what is it? Manidada kochadaganayan gamalaya the gandatalasya panihino chadasikatangshe pakshipan bujamagayate yatra. And what it says is that Krishna is ready to come back now from the forest with the cows. He's got all these hundreds of thousands of cows, so he doesn't want to leave any. They're divided into groups, large groups, according to the different features, the different color, the shapes of the horns. They have different names like that. Pranata Shringi, those who have little bent horns, and what was the other one? Pranata Shringi, I forget some of them. Have a mouth that really reminds you of a madanga drum. You can imagine, So, so there's the whole groups, and he's got to count them. So he's got a jeweled mala, like we have 108 tulsi beads. So he has 108 jewels, and each jewel represents a different group of cows. And he calls them by name, the different group leaders, and then all the group comes. And then when he's got 108, which adds up to 900,000, so each group is pretty large, and then they're ready to go back. And all the other boys, they all have thousands of cows too. So that's just one song describing that. And so the cows, they all have their individual names, and they love Krishna, and he loves them, and they, like that. So that's we fit in there. That's our Swarup. But Krishna, Tatastha Shakti, marginal energy, as we know, means we can go either way. This is our basic independence. We were afforded a minute independence because, otherwise there's no meaning to love. And that independence, we can misuse it, and then we come here and suffer. So that's tatastha, on the border. We can turn our attention away from Krishna and take it away and put it on this material world, as I've mentioned many times. And then that's the beginning of fearful life, because we've forgotten our protector. We've forgotten everything, and we're just dealing with the dualities of this world. Remember that in the end of the previous chapter, the delusion of dualities, good and bad, heat and cold. As if she loves me not. This is all of that is part of our material absorption. You see, and so how to get back to that Swarup? That's the whole point of Krishna consciousness, to regain that. And so we need training, and we need to understand our position, and Krishna is describing it. What are all these things? What is the Brahman? What is the self? And what is the activity that produces another body or karma? Okay. Any questions locally or remotely?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Oh, Hari Bol, Dhanavari.
Hare Krishna, please accept my humble obeisances.
Jai, glory to Prabhupada.
Actually, I have 2 questions if you have time.
Yeah,
one
we have
is,
plenty of time.
One is, you said we say Brahman, Aham Brahmasmi, and then Mayavadi also they believe, but they want to merge in the Lord's form. That's the only difference, right, between them and us. Like they also say Brahman, and we say Brahman, Aham Brahmasmi, but they want to merge with them instead.
Don't think that they want to merge in the Lord's form. They think the Lord's form is Maya. They think this is where the Nirvishesh comes in. We sing every day, Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschata Desha Tarine. Prabhupada is saving us, delivering us, Tarine, from these misconceptions. They're like dangerous crocodiles and sharks in the ocean of Maya, of samsara. All these philosophies. So Mayavadi is a big one. So they say that all of this variety and all of the names and the pastimes, this is all a variety of illusion. That the real thing is this undifferentiated Brahman, and we are little pieces of that we split off out of illusion. The delusion. And once we wake up from that illusion of that this variety is real, it's all like a dream, we'll merge back again into the Supreme Brahman. And it's just a question of knowledge. There's no question of devotion. How can there be devotion if there's no one out there? As soon as that's why the Mayavad philosophy is so dangerous. As soon as you start doubting that there's really someone out there, that Krishna is real, then what happens to your devotional mood? It's destroyed. You see? So that's why we rely on our great acharyas, Lord Chaitanya, Madhvacharya, Ramanuja, Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta, Bhaktivinoda. They all believed in Krishna, right? And are we going to say, no, they were all mistaken, I know better? No. We say, yeah, we trust them. And what's so important is the dyed-in-the-wool Mayavadis that Lord Chaitanya converted. And the others did too. Ramanuja, they had this thing. But we have wonderful stories. I was just reading in the 7th chapter, Adi Leela, about Prakashananda Saraswati. There's very, very intelligent. And he was dominant there, and he had thousands of followers. And they were condemning Lord Chaitanya because he was initiated, seemed to be one of them. The sannyasa ashram meant Mayavad at that time. The bhaktas would go and wander as Babajis, but the sannyasa. So Lord Chaitanya wanted to take sannyas because he wanted to preach. Babajis don't preach; they just wandered around in Vrindavan. So he said, "Well, you've taken. Why aren't you studying Vedanta? You're just dancing and chanting." The sentimentalists, they were criticizing. And so his dear devotees, Chandrasekhar and Tapan Mishra, I think, they were being hurt in pain to hear all this criticism of Lord Chaitanya. Said, we're going to commit suicide, you have to do something. So he arranged that some Brahmin came and invited him, otherwise he would avoid the Mayavadis entirely. But he decided to go to them. It's a wonderful conversation. He wins their hearts, and then they listen to him. He explains the Vedanta, which is really personalist, Bhakti Vedanta, right? And they're all converted, and they become bhaktas, So the idea is that the Mayavadis don't want to merge with the form. They say the form of Krishna is illusion. They want to merge with the white light, the supreme light, and regain their position as the Parabrahman. It's fallacious, but it's very dangerous to hear because they're very sharp logicians. Vedanta is Nyaya Prastan. It is based on logic and reasoning. And if you absorb yourself in that, and you're prone to that, you can get convinced, or at least doubts can arise. So we don't mix with the Mayavadis. Can I go on?
Merging is, not good, right? Even mentality merge with, that's not good at all.
We don't want to merge at all. We're not merging. What we're emerging. Our spiritual body is emerging from our, from this ignorant material body. We're trying to awaken and become aware of who we actually are. That's another part of Sambandha Gyan. What is our real relationship with Krishna, the details, and what form we have to enact that relationship. That's a higher understanding of Sambandha Gyan. But this is also Sambandha. What is Brahman? What is this world? Who am I? What does it mean to be marginal energy? And these external energies. We just read this in the last chapter. What is it? Boomer Apple on Obaya. This is all Sambandha Gyan. Can I go on? One more? What was that, a yes? All right, I'm going to go on to text 4. Adibhutam charo bhava purushas chari daivatam adiyagyo hame vatra Dehi deha patambara. O best of the embodied beings, the physical nature, which is constantly changing, is called adibhuta, the material manifestation. The universal form of the Lord, which includes all the demigods, like those of the sun and moon, is called the adidaiva. And I, the Supreme Lord, represented as the Supersoul in the heart of every embodied being, am called the adiyagya, the Lord of sacrifice. Purport. The physical nature is constantly changing. Material bodies generally pass through 6 stages. They are born, they grow, they remain for some duration, they produce some byproducts, they dwindle, and then they vanish. This physical nature is called adibhuta. It is created at a certain point and will be annihilated at a certain point. The conception of the universal form of the Supreme Lord, which includes all the demigods and their different planets, is called adidaivata. And present in the body, along with the individual soul, is the Supersoul, a plenary representation of Lord Krishna. The Supersoul is called the Paramatma, or Adiyagya, and is situated in the heart. The word eva is particularly important in the context of this verse because by this word the Lord stresses that the Paramatma is not different from him. The Supersoul, the Supersoul, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, seated beside the individual soul, is the witness of the individual soul's activities and is the source of the soul's various types of consciousness. The Supersoul gives the individual soul an opportunity to act freely and witnesses his activities. The functions of all these different manifestations of the Supreme Lord automatically become clarified for the pure Krishna conscious devotee engaged in transcendental service to the Lord. The gigantic universal form of the Lord, called Adidaivata, is contemplated by the neophyte who cannot approach the Supreme Lord in his manifestation as the Supersoul. The neophyte is advised to contemplate the universal form, or Virat Purusha, whose legs are considered the lower planets, whose eyes are considered the sun and moon, and whose head is considered the upper planetary system. So, these are more somewhat technical terms, but important for us to understand. So, Adibhuta, again, what is that? Adidaivika, Adiatmika, and Adibhautika, right? Miseries? So that's referred to the Adibhuta. And this is the whole material manifestation. And notice that we had in the previous verse, Bhuta Bhavo Bhavakaro. This word Bhava means change. Constantly changing. This is why this is called Bhava Sagara. We're in this ocean, like an ocean is constantly moving and changing. So this material world is constantly changing. Our body is constantly changing, right? And this world of change, this is commonly, samsara, birth, old age, disease, and death. Prabhupada gives these classic 6 changes. And if to think about it, everything is born, the little child is born, and the first thing that happens that's going on with that child, he's growing, right? The child grows. And, the clothes get too small, and you keep growing. So you grow, and then at a certain point you're mature, right? And then you're staying for some time. So you're born, you come into being, you're growing, you're remaining for some time, and during that time you produce byproducts, children or something like that. That's the idea. And then you keep going, and you dwindle. It's like an arc, of time, and eventually everything created, is destroyed. And we've been going through those changes. But the soul doesn't go through the changes. The Jayate Meti Bhakata, Nayam Bhut Vaba Vidhava Nabuya. That verse deals with these 6 changes. The living entity doesn't go through those, is not born, it doesn't grow, it produces byproducts. This is all done through the material body. So that's the Adibhuta. Physical nature in general is called Adibhuta. It's created and it will be annihilated at some point. Then he talks about the universal form. Now, it's interesting that the demigods are part of this universal form, meaning that they all have a function. There's millions of them. There's some that we know, that we hear all the time, but every single action that we have, the Prabhupada point, the blinking of the eyes, you go the twinkling of the eyes, that's also some demigod, is saying, okay, his karma is okay, he can blink, but somebody else can't blink, blind, or the arm doesn't work, or whatever, It's all, we're linked up to the universal form. Our body is made of the same elements as everything else. So we're linked up to this universal form. Now this is a kind of ecological understanding. People are understanding, oh my God, it's out of balance. Yeah. You remember we read about the kingdoms of Yudhishthir or Prithu, after he had reformed everything. And the material nature was working very nicely because of the king. And all the gods, are showering, and there's enough rain at the right time, and that type of thing. But look at what's going on now. So much disruption. I mean, you don't have to be a philosopher to understand that there's something going on that hasn't been going on before. These incredible storms with the record cold, and then the fires, and the glaciers melting, and all of the insects dying off, I mean, it's obvious that we've causing tremendous disruptions, and it's going to cause more and more suffering. In the 12th canto it's described how there won't be any food, or the only food will be meat, there won't be any vegetables, there won't be any fruit, and a lot of starvation. It's happening right now. How this is going to go on for 27,000 more years, I don't know. That's one of the big mysteries. We'll see. It just looks like maybe 10 years. I mean, even the scientists are saying if we don't do something quickly, it's going to be out of control. You don't have, but you can see we're seeing every day. With this COVID thing, what's caused it? Pushing nature. Exploiting, mixing in with the, all these different animals together, whatever it is. The diseases jumped over into the human body. That's the science. But it's all because we're ruthlessly, demonically, trying to exploit nature in newer and newer ways, in more and more extreme ways. And nature always wins in the end. So, that nature, that's all part of the universal form. There's an intelligence behind everything. Nothing is happening by accident. And the fact that the super soul is in our heart, witnessing everything, understanding all of our thoughts and our past and our future. For a devotee, this can be very bracing when you take it for real. Oh, okay, well I better behave. Right? I better do the right thing, because you can't hide anything. The whole illusion of the conditioned soul, in Maya, is that he thinks he's getting away with something, right? He's thinking, well, this is my field of enjoyment now. I've got this strong body, but that's gross illusion. That's not the constitutional position. You remember the basic meaning of the word dharma. Dharma means it's based in this root word dri. Every Sanskrit word has a root, and dri means that which sustains. Just like we have Giridhari, you see? Dhari is sustaining the hill. So there's a certain a natural function that everything has, and that's its dharma. As I point out, dharma, that chair there, is that it'll support you. You sit down and it'll support you in a more comfortable position. And as I mentioned before, if you sit on that chair and it collapses, that chair has not, performed its dharma. Right? It's a trick chair. Somebody's. So similarly, everything has its dharma, and we also have our dharma as spirit souls, and that basic dharma is to serve. We serve. If we're not going to serve Krishna, we're going to serve Maya, and serving Maya causes great suffering because we're out of our natural position. And so it's just like if you mix up some nice halva. And I put salt, right? So you spoil the halva because you used the wrong thing, obviously. So the dharma is of salt is to be salty and the sugar to be sweet, like that. It has to be. So we have been out of our dharma, being adharmic, since we've been out of the spiritual world, because we're trying to be separate, and it's unnatural, and that's why we're suffering. So all of this instruction is helping us to get back. And he's reached the point of describing the Adiyagya, and that's the key, because the Adiyagya is Krishna himself. You remember there was description of all these different jagyas one can perform. But the real jagya is meant for pleasing the Jagya Purush, who is Krishna himself, of Vishnu. And as Prabhupada always mentions, the third chapter, every other purport, because there's so much about yagya. The actual jagya of the age is Sankirtan jagya. That's the most effective jagya for this age. It's perfectly suited for this age. So when we ignore that Adiyagya, and we're performing material sacrifices, because everyone's performing some sacrifices, then we just get more and more entangled in the material world. But when we recognize the Adiyagya in our heart, and we find out through the books and through the acharyas, through the great devotees, what will please that Adiyagya and how that will benefit us, then we're on the road out of this material world. And that's what we're performing now. Coming to this class is a jagya. I know listening to me for half an hour is really a jagya. So, but because we're basically reading the book, there's some benefit here, and there's a million other things we can be thinking about and directing our energy, mental energy toward. But because we're absorbed in trying to understand Krishna's words, the Super Soul is pleased, giving us the intelligence and helping. We're taking steps to get out of this material world and return back to Godhead. Okay. Any questions on text 4? Okay. We are at 8 o'clock. Okay, we can begin the next 3 verses are really key, and oftentimes, several times in my career, I've been asked to give the Sunday feast, and I just focus on 5, 6, and 7 of this chapter, because it's a whole lesson, and it embodies the real essence of what we're trying to do in Krishna consciousness. So, because don't forget, one of the questions is, Prayanakali Chikatam Gayasi Niyatapmabi, how can one know you at the time of death? Because that's what we absorbs our mind at the time of death, that makes our destiny. So that's what we're trying to aim, that's the final exam we're aiming for. So that starts in text 5. Antakare chamameva smaran mukva kalevaram yakpriyati samadbhavam yati nastyatra sangshayaha. And whoever, at the end of his life, quits his body remembering me alone, at once attains my nature. Of this there is no doubt. Purport. In this verse, the importance of Krishna consciousness is stressed. Anyone who quits his body in Krishna consciousness is at once transferred to the transcendental nature of the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord is the purest of the pure. Therefore, anyone who is constantly Krishna conscious is also the purest of the pure. The word smaran, remembering, is important. Remembrance of Krishna is not possible for the impure soul who has not practiced Krishna consciousness in devotional service. Therefore, one should practice Krishna consciousness from the very beginning of life. If one wants to achieve success at the end of his life, the process of remembering Krishna is essential. Therefore, one should constantly, incessantly chant the Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Lord Chaitanya has advised that one be as tolerant as a tree, Toro Iva Sahishnuna. There may be so many impediments for a person who is chanting Hare Krishna. Nonetheless, tolerating all these impediments, one should continue to chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, so that at the end of one's life, one can have the full benefit of Krishna consciousness. So every so often you come upon these purports which is like, okay, now I understand. This is the whole purpose of this whole thing. So why, why chant Hare Krishna? Well, here it's very simple. If you believe in Krishna's words, you understand that the dominant thought at the time of death, antakale, the end time of this body, is going to determine what your next life is. And if you doubt that, you read the next verse. That's what it gives a general principle. So that should inspire us to, between now and that time, that end time for this particular body, We ourselves will not die, we know that. But we have, in this period of awareness, now if we're beginning to wake up, oh, now I understand life actually has a purpose, and it shouldn't be wasted on frivolous activities, just ensuring another birth and more suffering. So then we should learn how to develop our Krishna consciousness, so we come to that point of avismriti. We've been stressing that in the morning. Avismriti, Krishna Badar Avindayo, a constant remembrance of Krishna's lotus feet of Krishna. And that the most efficacious way of doing that in this age especially is the chanting of the holy name. And this Maha Mantra is the great mantra for deliverance. What does it say in the Kali Santana Upanishad? Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Iti Shodashakam Nam, Kali Kalmashanashanam, Natak Padataropaya, Sarva Vedeshu Drishyate. You can search throughout the entire Vedic literature, but you will not find a better way of counteracting the evils of this age than chanting this holy name. And there's so many statements in the Shastra about the glories of chanting. The Bhagavatam is filled with them. Right in the first chapter, Apanak Sangsritim Gauram Yannama Vivashogunan Tatak Sadyo Vimucheta Yadbabeti Swayam Bhayam, describing that one who is entangled in this material world. Apanak Sangsritim Gauram, very horrible samsriti, samsara. If someone somehow or other chants your holy name at the time of death, even by accident, and become delivered, free from fear. So this Maha Mantra is our great blessing, the avatar for this age. In this age, the holy name, Krishna comes as his holy name, as an avatar, and non-different from Krishna. You want to associate with God, chant his holy name, And the more that you hear and from devotees, such as Srila Prabhupada's books, you have more faith that this is truly the absolute truth, and you'll be more enlivened to chant. And you'll soon find out that your main enemy in this obstacle in this whole thing is your own mind. The mind is pulling you away, and so that's the essential part of the sadhana. Bring it back under the control of the self, which just means so that we hear the holy name nicely, with attention. And that makes all the difference, because Krishna, he sees our effort, and through that holy name, he attracts us to him and away from Maya. And soon, we can actually get the strength to follow the four regular principles, become regulated, and become serious in devotional service. And so it all makes sense then. And all of these things fall into place, And we can remember, what is this adibhuta? Why do I want to perform activity that's going to produce another body? I don't want to do that. That's karmic. That's fruit of activity. So we become more astute in watching our activities and following the principles that have been so mercifully set out for us. And then we can navigate through this dangerous Kali Yuga world, where there are so many. We know that in one sense, the whole presentation that Maya puts before us for the conditioned soul, it's our job to keep us bewildered until we get enlightened. It's a big lie. It's a big lie that you can be happy, in this world. You remember that fellow Jamie who was here? Yeah. He came by, and he was coming over. Yeah. And he was a nice guy. He tried to sit in class. He really liked my classes, but he couldn't sit. You remember that? He would sit for maybe 5 minutes, then he had to get up, and his mind. He had taken so much cocaine that he just burned his brain out, and somehow I think he was incarcerated for a while, but now he came in trouble. He's always in trouble. So he wanted me to help him. I don't know. I couldn't really help him much. But it's such a tragedy. Here's an intelligent guy. He had some attraction for Krishna, but he'd ruined his chances. It's just it's tragic to see that. And this world is full of casualties of this age. So we should try to get out. Don't try to take birth again in this Kali Yuga. That should be an impetus. And also trying to save as many people as possible, or give them seed of Krishna consciousness at least. All right, so we're almost ready to adjourn, but let me give you a nice hopeful shloka, something. This one, we're talking about Lord Chaitanya's teaching to Sanatana. So the beginning of the Abhideya section, where he's describing the practice of devotional service, is Kamadinam verse. Kamadinam katina katita palita durnideshas tesham jata mayana karuna natrapano prashantihi utsrijayata natayotapate sampratam labna buddhis tvamayatak shadanamamayam mamna yuntrakmadasye. In how many ways have I sought to obey the seductive demands of my wicked desires? They've shown me no mercy, yet on I've gone shamelessly trying to quench lust's unquenchable fires. But now I'm rejecting these hellish desires, for my higher intelligence now has awoken. O Krishna, O shelter of fearlessness, please let me serve you with faith that will never be broken. This should be our prayer. This was written by Madhavendra Puri and included in the book. So let's keep awaken our intelligence through studying Prabhupada's books, attending class, and, as we've been hearing, carrying out the orders in the books and the instructions in the books, and that'll be real service. Thank you very much. All glory to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Bol.